As human civilization seeks ways to make itself more efficient and more sustainable, new technologies emerge to modify or replace the status quo. There are many areas where this is happening. Renewable energy generation is price competitive with fossil fuels. Electric vehicles are competing with and slowly replacing combustion engine vehicles. And new plastics are being developed that are more biodegradable and less ecologically harmful than petroleum plastics. However, one major and stubbornly persistent issue has been agriculture. To feed the many billions of people in the world, we've developed advanced agricultural processes, including high-intensity, high-yield vegetable farming and high-density cattle farming. The cattle farming industry, for example, is an unethical nightmare of inefficiency and waste. Millions of animals are kept in high-density housing, pumped up with antibiotics to stave off the illnesses so common in such cramped, unhygienic conditions. And this in itself contributes to the rising problem of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. All of these cattle and pigs have to excrete their waste, and this creates huge lakes of piss and feces. Huge expanses of farmland are required to grow the feedstock just for these pigs and cattle. The cattle farms and the slaughterhouses themselves are also large, sprawling compounds, taking up huge amounts of land. The greenhouse gas emissions from this industry are quite substantial, and we haven't even talked about the ethical issue of exposing millions of intelligent vertebrate animals to a brief, uncomfortable life in slaughterhouse conditions. The point is, this industry sucks, and it's in need of a competitor that poses an existential threat to the current business model. And that is where today's news comes in. There is a new technology that can replace this status quo, and it's known as lab-grown meat. Now, I've talked about this before, but to summarize, lab-grown meat is real meat. It's real animal flesh made of real animal cells. It's just that this muscle tissue is grown in a vat in a lab, instead of on the bones of a living animal. Now, this might sound a little icky, a little like kinda Frankenstein-y, but there's a lot of benefits to the system, and I'll get into those benefits in just a minute. The main news that I want to tell you about today is the opening of a large production plant for the Future Meat Technologies company. Now, this plant is in Rehovot, Israel, near the Hebrew University of Jerusalem Faculty of Agriculture. The Future Meat Technologies company has developed the technology behind this lab-grown meat, or this cultivated meat, and now they're opening a commercial production facility with the capacity to produce about 500 kilograms, or about 1,100 pounds, of meat products every day. According to a news release about the plant opening, this is about 5,000 hamburgers worth of meat per day. According to Future Meat Technologies CEO Ram Kashuk, they expect to have their cultured meat products on grocery store shelves sometime next year, sometime in 2022. However, it might be a bit misleading to describe the amount of meat they can produce in a day by using hamburgers as a unit, because the production plant actually doesn't grow beef yet. They're working on viable beef platforms, but currently they grow chicken, lamb, and pork. And they can grow these meats all without any animal serum, which would require tissue taken from animals and it may cause pain. And they also don't use any genetic modification at all, which means that this cultured meat technically is not a GMO. They can also grow the meat really quickly. The company representatives have said that their production cycles are 20 times faster than status quo cattle farming. Now, I'm not 100% certain what they meant by the wording of this statement, but I think what this means is that in the same time that it takes to produce 1 pound of meat through typical cattle farming, the cultured meat labs could produce, theoretically, 20 pounds of meat. Future Meat Technologies' Chief Scientific Officer, Professor Yaakov Namias, cited the speed of production as a critical factor in their meat reaching price parity with typical cattle farming faster than the market expected. On top of this, the facility is much more contained and efficient, and their production process is also highly optimized and much more efficient than typical cattle farming. So the current estimates of the environmental impact of this new production facility suggest that when you compare it to a typical cattle farm producing a similar quantity of meat, This new production facility will create 80% fewer greenhouse gas emissions. It'll use 96% less fresh water and require 99% less land. I feel like I have to repeat those numbers to make that sink in, because this is absolutely tremendous. Being able to produce meat with 96% less fresh water is groundbreaking, especially as we enter a climate-altered future where fresh water will become increasingly scarce. The 99% less land is also really important, because, at least theoretically, a lot of this land could be used for much more ecologically sustainable things, or it could just be left alone to rewild naturally. Either option is good for carbon sequestration, which we need to do more of too. And all of this meat production involves precisely zero suffering of any animals. They're literally just growing muscle tissue in a lab. No live animals are involved. And on this note, cultivated meat kind of flips a lot of the contemporary ethical discussion around meat eating on its head, because this cultivated meat is real animal flesh that's actually perfectly ethical for a vegan to eat. All of this stuff is really exciting. I really hope that this production facility does well and becomes popular, because then they can further optimize their process. They can scale up and gradually replace the typical cattle farming business model, and eventually similar companies will spring up all over the world, and the problems of animal agriculture can hopefully all be resolved. Now, this would be a major win all on its own, but there's even more tangential benefits. Lab-grown meat could actually be part of a solution to child malnourishment, as cheap, high-quality meat products could be distributed to places that are historically food deserts. This technology even has potential application beyond the Earth, as any astronauts in spaceships or on the International Space Station, or any colonists on Mars or any other planetary body in the future, they could use this technology to produce high-quality meat protein in their diets, in situ, right there in the colony, in the spaceship, without having a big chamber to hold all of your animals and the food for your animals and the waste for the animals and all of the stuff that comes along with having actual real animals that you're growing for food. If you're growing your meat in a lab or in a vat or something, all of these problems go away. The long and short of it is that this lab-grown meat technology is awesome, and the benefits are incredible. It has widespread application, and it can address many problems, from agricultural contribution to the antibiotic resistance problem, to the lakes of piss and shit and the inefficient use of land, to carbon sequestration, to the ethics of animal husbandry and animal slaughtering for food. All of these things can be addressed with this lab-grown meat technology. And we're watching global markets respond to this emergent technology in real time. This is just one of those incredible things that gives you a bit of hope for a better future.